What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Sector for Nerds, and welcome to another episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars Retro Discussions. Today we're here to talk about Season 3, Episode 15, Overlords. That's right, folks, the start of the Mortis trilogy. For some people, this is one of the best arcs in the Clone Wars. For some people, it's the best arc in the Clone Wars. I can't wait for the next 3 weeks of this show, you guys, to be able to talk with you guys about these episodes. So today we're going to get into the first one. This one was directed by Stuart Lee and written by Christian Taylor. The cookie for this episode: balance is found in the one who faces his guilt. Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Plenty of great content every single week, you guys. Definitely don't want to miss out on any of it. All right, guys, let's bring in the man of the hour to let us know what is going down in this episode. Intro guy, take it away. Mysterious message. A transmission has been intercepted far beyond the Outer Rim, deep in the Corinthium system. Why this call has been made and from where cannot be established. But buried in the message is a Jedi distress code that has not been used in over 2,000 years. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and his Padawan AHSOKA are sent to investigate, fearing a separatist trap. They are to meet with a heavily armed Jedi cruiser. Thank you, intro guy. Well, I'm gonna tell you what, they're gonna meet up with a Jedi cruiser, but, both people are in the rendezvous point. Rex is in the rendezvous point with his cruiser, but Anakin's not there. But yet, Anakin, and the other Jedi, they're on their way. They're at the rendezvous point, and Rex isn't there. And then the power goes down on Anakin's ship, and it's like, all right, this all is getting really, really weird. And then there's this giant pyramid in space that sucks them in, and there they find themselves on this planet. Like, their ship landed, they had all blacked out during the landing, so it was like, well, who landed the ship? And they try to get it working again, and Anakin's like, yeah, I mean, the ship systems, everything's fine, but for whatever reason, nothing's working. And it's really weird. Like, what on earth is happening here? They get sucked into this prison. They don't even know if they're in their own galaxy. Their ship's not working, even though nothing's wrong with it. Like, what's happening here? And then this girl shows up. Her name's Daughter.
And we thought the planet was strange. How about this one?
And Obi-Wan responds with, we'll be fine, as long as we stay together. Oh, don't do that to me, Obi-Wan.
We'll be fine, as long as we stay together.
Now, another very curious thing about this planet is the seasons were changing in the time of day. So as they go on, stuff starts to look, go from more of like a summer look, then to more of an autumn look. And then, when it gets nighttime, it gets very dark and stormy. There's this whole idea of like the Force being really strong here. And like, there's so much that's happening with mystery surrounding this episode so far. We have so many questions, no answers.
Excuse me, who are you taking us to?
The Father, of course.
Of course.
And what exactly are you?
We are the ones who guard the power. We are the middle, the beginning, and the end.
Glad she cleared that up for us.
But then Anakin has to save the daughter because there's like a cliff or a rock that's going to fall down on them. Anakin pushes the daughter out of the way, but it separates him from Obi-Wan and Ahsoka. So Obi-Wan and Ahsoka go back to the ship, and, well, it's gone. It's not there. And all of a sudden, this dark presence approaches. As nighttime arrives.
You didn't do as you were asked.
And what was that?
My sister said to wait.
Did she now? Well, we were unfortunately separated. We'd like our ship back if you don't mind.
Not yet.
And it takes a turn real quick when he says, is it true that he is the chosen one? And I'm like, what? Uh-oh. How does he know about that? And then as Obi-Wan and Ahsoka obviously both have their lightsabers on at this point because they're like, bro, what the heck? The son's just like, nah, we're going to turn these off. And he just like force pushes the sabers off. Who are these people?
Is it true that he is the chosen one?
What do you know of such things?
What is about to happen shall occur, whether you like it or not.
You are Sith.
Sith. Yes. And no.
Obi-Wan's like, you are Sith. And the son's like, yeah. Also, no. He says, look, the storms here are pretty lethal. If you want to live, I suggest you find shelter. And all of a sudden he just jumps in the air and turns into this giant bird raptor creature. Still so many questions. Now, I do want to give a shout out here to the son and the daughter. You're going to see in a little bit that this episode, they had pulled in some people from the Phantom Menace crew to come back and reprise their roles as certain characters in this episode. But another thing that they did was pull into the Force Unleashed cast and got some of them to do voices for this episode. Voicing the daughter is Adrian Wilkinson, who does the voice of Maris Brood. By the way, shout out to the Force Unleashed. Force Unleashed is my favorite Star Wars game of all time. And voicing the son is none other than Star Killer himself, Sam Witwer.
Hurry. Shakti's apprentice has gone mad.
This whole planet has gone insane.
Oh, we're not crazy. We've just embraced the power of the dark side.
Stand aside, girl.
Don't make me hurt you.
You won't.
So then we get to see Anakin meeting the last, of these people that we get to see here in this episode, and that's the father. No mother? Interesting. The father has an echo in his voice very similar to the way that Mother Talzin did. And he basically tells Anakin, like, it's late, you will stay tonight as my guest. Okay, that's very nice of him. I'm sure everything is just going to go smoothly. Anakin's just going to get a good night's sleep. They'll just work everything out in the morning and everything will be fine, right? I don't think so. Well, I mentioned before pulling from the Phantom Menace crew to come and do voices for this episode. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there, like, they're showing the shot of, like, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka in the cave. Ahsoka's sleeping. Obi-Wan just sitting there with his lightsaber. And all of a sudden you hear, Obi-Wan, have you done as I've asked? Have you trained the boy? And I immediately picked up on the voice, and I was like, no way.
Obi-Wan, have you done as I asked? Have you trained the boy?
Master Qui-Gon, how are you here?
I am here because you are here.
No, I don't understand. What is this place?
Unlike any other, a conduit through which the entire force of the universe flows.
They brought Liam Neeson back to voice Qui-Gon. And that was something that Dave was very adamant about when watching the behind the scenes for this episode, like, to get him back and doing this. Like, man, I'm so glad that he did. And they basically have this conversation about how there's like 3 beings here who are seeking Anakin, that they believe him to be the chosen one. And if he is the chosen one, he'll discover it here. But if not, then with his powers, this is a very dangerous place for him to be. Once again, more questions, no answers. Because you always got to think, right? Like, was that actually Qui-Gon speaking with Obi-Wan? Or was it meant to be like a manifestation of the Force speaking to Obi-Wan through Qui-Gon? Dave even talks about in the behind the scenes for this too, because he says, like, yeah, we don't really have much for you guys on these behind the scenes for these episodes, because he's like, I don't want to answer too many questions about the Mortis episode. We have the answers. We know all of the stuff that of what George wanted here, but we also want to leave room for the fans to speculate and for them to think about, like, what's actually going on here. He had also brought up in this too that, like, everything that they had done regarding the Force in these episodes all had to come from George, which makes sense, right? I mean, he's the creator of Star Wars after all. But yeah, like, holy crap, they got Qui-Gon in here. And then the hits just keep on rolling. Because then in comes Shmi Skywalker to talk with Anakin. And here I was like, okay, what's really going on here? Shout out to Pernilla August to reprise her role as Shmi. This is like the only other time in Star Wars that we get Anakin's mom, right? Besides the prequel movies. Shout out to Matt Lanner in this scene. He gave like a really good performance here, putting over like, man, I slayed so many people to avenge your death, and I like carrying this guilt, carrying this burden. It was really good. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are watching this have probably heard the story from Sam Witwer before, about one of the things that he did when he first got brought onto this show. And it's the whole story of like how Dave found respect for Sam or whatever, because originally in the script, they had for Anakin to talk with Shmi about Padme, him basically saying like, look, mom, I have a wife. Like, I want you to meet her. Like, I'm doing good for myself here. Again, a lot of you have probably heard this before, but for those who haven't, Sam was like, okay, actually, we need to stop this. We need to redo that take right now. And Dave, had the look on his face like, oh my gosh, the new guy talking like, all right, what do you want? And Sam goes, Shmi has met Padme before in The Phantom Menace. And Dave, I guess, just like had this look on his face like, did she? Oh, I guess she did. That's right, she did. Dude, I legit one of the things that I would have paid to have been there to see. Holy crap. Like Sam Witwer out nerding Dave Filoni on Star Wars, like that's amazing. It's such a great story.
The only love I feel in my heart is haunted by what would happen should I let go.
Then it is not love. It is a prison.
But I have a wife. You've met her. She's everything to me.
And honestly, I think that's why like Dave has so much respect for Sam. And like, man, if Sam Witwer wanted to, and I'm not even just bringing it up because of this story, but I'm just talking for like Sam's knowledge of Star Wars. If Sam Witwer really wanted to, he could be a part of the creative process for like making Star Wars. I firmly believe that. He's actually someone that knows about Star Wars and gives a damn about Star Wars. So yeah, this is crazy. We got Obi-Wan sitting here talking with Qui-Gon. We've got Anakin talking with his mom, Shmi. I wonder if Ahsoka is going to meet anybody. Oh, she does. She meets her older self.
There are many contradictions in you and in him. Be warned. You may never see your future if you remain his student. Leave this planet.
And that to me as well was a situation that opened up so many questions because, well, we don't see Ahsoka in Revenge of the Sith. Surely Ahsoka probably has to die in this show somewhere, right? And maybe that's what older Ahsoka was foreshadowing, right? You may never see your future if you remain his student. Ahsoka continues to be under the mentorship of Anakin, and somewhere along the line, she ends up dying. Lucky for me and all the other Ahsoka fans out there, that's not what happened. So then Anakin goes to talk with the father, you know, putting the lightsaber up towards his face, and he's like, okay, bro, you gotta start talking. Like, what the heck is going on here? And then, well, to make things even more confusing and shocking,
Some call us Force wielders.
The Jedi have never spoken of this.
I was like, who are these people? The father kind of talks a little bit about it, right? Like, oh, my son has the ability to, like, you know, change forms into, you know, many different people, which then also opens up another question of itself. How would the son have known who Anakin's mom was? So that's interesting. And he talks about, the father talks about how he had to bring his children to this place. This is the only place where I can contain them and keep them in balance. There's many people that try to exploit our powers, the Sith being one of them. So then that's another thing that I started questioning too, of like, okay, if the Sith are trying to exploit their power, then that would probably be how Sidious knows of them. Because like I always think back to, you know, a little bit of foreshadowing, right, to Star Wars Rebels. There's some stuff in that series that talks about the Mortis gods. Sidious quite clearly knows who they are. I don't know if he would have known who they are at this time, or if it would have been something that he would have undercovered later when, like, you know, Order 66 happened and he would have had possession to the Jedi archives, you know, in the temple. Even to this day, like, what, this episode came out, like, what, back in, what would have been, like, 2011, maybe 2010, 2011. And we're still sat here over a decade later, potentially even longer, depending on when you're watching this. And you can still ask yourself the same questions, and we don't have answers. I think it's okay. I don't feel like, as a Star Wars fan, I should have to know every single thing. As a fan, I can speculate and come up with my own ideas for things. But I've also come to accept that there are just certain things in Star Wars that, you know, we as fans may not always truly understand. And I think the Mortis stuff is definitely something that, like, I would accept. Like, if it was something that, like, Dave and the creative people that were working on this show are, like, the only ones who really know, like, the answers to all the questions that we have about these episodes, like, that's cool. That's part of the fun, right? Is having fun speculating and trying to come up with your own answers to the questions. But going back to this episode, the father, you know, he says, when word made its way out to me that the Chosen One was found, I needed to see it for myself, which, by the way, I don't know how we would have, like, who would have told him that, unless he's just that powerful in the Force, he could have sensed it. I don't know. But Anakin very crucially says that the Chosen One is a myth. Does he actually believe that? That's really interesting because the whole idea of the prequels is that Anakin is the only one who can bring the Force back into balance.
The Chosen One is a myth.
Is it? I should very much like to know.
But the father's like, oh, is it a myth now? Well, you know what? I'd like to know for myself. So here's what we're going to do. Pass one test, and then you and your friends may leave. So I'm like, okay, something bad's gonna happen. And sure enough, it does, because, you know, we see that Ahsoka and Obi-Wan end up getting taken. And when it comes time for the final test, they are brought down by the giant bird raptors, who are the children. And he goes, well, which one are you gonna save? Are you gonna save your master, or are you gonna save your apprentice? Obi-Wan says, you know, the powers are too strong for us, Anakin. Save Ahsoka. And Anakin, you know, he's sitting there like, let them go. Like, I'm not playing your games. And he's like, oh, I think you will. Only you can make my children release them. And Obi-Wan says a very crucial thing here. He says, Anakin, the planet is the Force. Use it. And this, to me, watching it back then and watching it now still makes me believe that, like, this version of Anakin that we see in this moment is like Anakin at his fullest potential, at his most powerful.
You will let them go.
He's able to take these two powerful Force gods, or whatever you want to call them, and he's just like bending them to his will. And you can even hear, like, when he says, on your knees, like, you hear the echo in his voice, like almost like what the father had before, right? Like in his voice. And it's like, holy crap. If the planet is the Force, then I feel like only Anakin would have been able to do what he could do in that moment, right? And like the father even says, only the Chosen One could contain both my children.
I've taken your test. Now fulfill your promise and let us go.
Ah, but first, you must understand the truth. Now, all of you leave us.
He basically says, look, I'm dying and I need you to replace me. Anakin's like, wait a minute, replace you? I can't stay here. The father's like, but this is all meant to be yours. Like, it's been foretold that the Chosen One will remain here and keep my children in balance. What about the universe, father? Did you ever think about that? Anakin's like, no, dude, I'm not doing this. And the father's like, all right, look, I can't force you to do this. The choice has to be yours. But just know that if you do leave, your selfishness will haunt you and the rest of the galaxy. And you could tell that really hit Anakin, because the moment comes where, like, they're at their ship and they're all ready to go, and Anakin's just sitting there looking at the palace, and Obi-Wan has to kind of like snap him out of it, like, hey, hello there. He didn't say that, but, you know, ready to get out of here? And Anakin kind of like just stops and thinks there for a moment first, and until he finally turns around and gets on the ship. But like, it's definitely one of those like endings that's meant to leave us all thinking, like, well, what does that mean? Like, we see what Anakin becomes. Like, is him not staying here part of the reason for that? You listen to the end music that they play at the end of the episode. It's that dark side theme, like at a much like higher pitched, you know, organ music or whatever, but like it's there. And again, it was just like one of those endings where I'm like, it left me with so many questions, and I'm like, okay, well, surely this isn't over, right? And then, of course, like, I think I remember them playing like a little teaser trailer for the next episode, and it still involved Mortis stuff. So it's like, okay, you know, we're not done with this yet. Good. But again, I will also mention this, you guys, like, growing up as a kid, as much as I did enjoy this episode, like, at first time we were watching it, you know, I did enjoy it. But at the same time, my mind was still heavily into, but what's going on with Asajj Ventress and Savage Opress and the Night Sisters and all of them? Because I was so wrapped up in that story. As the years had gone by and I would get older, like, I enjoyed the crap out of the Mortis arc. You know, now that I think about it, I think I actually even did a video talking about my 10 favorite arcs of the Clone Wars too. If I'll remember that, I'll link that at the end of this video. But yeah, man, holy crap, what a start to this arc here. This was so different. Like, you know, obviously the Night Sister stuff was different too. It's actually, you know what, it's really curious because it felt like the last arc kind of got away from like the Clone Wars style battles and episodes. You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously, yeah, there were still elements of the war in there and you knew it was going on and whatnot, but it was more about the story of Ventress. And these episodes these are definitely like veering away from the Clone Wars, and it's so different. There's not these like, big battles, across planets and space and things like that. This is just like, this is very like story driven. And I think that's something that resonates with a lot of the fans. So yeah, you guys, I think that is going to wrap up all my thoughts on the first episode of the Mortis arc. Next week, we are going to be talking about part 2 of this arc called The Altar of Mortis. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video with others to help support the channel. And I will see you guys next time.
Always with the criticism, Master. Never really believing in me, trusting me. Well, I don't need you anymore.
Ahsoka. Ahsoka, listen to me. He has done something to you. Snap out of it. This isn't you, Ahsoka.
Isn't it? I feel more like myself than I ever have. He asked me to give you a message. He said, if you don't join him, he will kill me.
I won't let him.
Then you will be forced to kill me.